Welcome to the Essay Masterclass and welcome to your eventual selection in UPSC mains. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that with all certainty and I take full responsibility for the statement that I've just made. Why am I taking responsibility for it? Is because in the last 15-20 years, what we have seen, our empirical observation with respect to this exam tells us a story. And that story invariably leads us to essay. You will remember one thing, you should, for your benefit, that in your GS mains, which is 250 marks each, out of 1000 marks, candidates typically score, good candidates, I am talking about the serious aspirants, the ones who are in the fray, they score anywhere in excess of, one can say, 350, okay, or even 400. Now, this is a general, one can say, this is a range where a lot of serious UPSC aspirants lie, right? So, more or less, everybody is crowding this space of 350, 400. There is not much to separate the candidates one from the other. Then, what typically separates the candidates one from the other is actually the essay. Now, essay carries 250 marks, right? But these 250 marks are worth more than 250. If you ask me, they are worth more than even 500. Because of a simple reason that it is not very easy to score heavily in mains in essay, but it is also very easy. Allow me to explain. I have no intention of taking you through an unnecessary puzzle here. See, it's easy and difficult at the same time. I'll explain why. For GS1, General Studies 2, 3 and even 4, you have a syllabus, right? And when you have a syllabus, you have a direction. When you have direction, there is mentorship available, there is proper coaching available, there is peer-to-peer learning which is possible. So, you can definitely expect a lot of hand-holding support, a lot of coaching, a lot of peer-to-peer learning when you're targeting GS 1, 2, 3 and 4. But when you talk about essay, the essay preparation is the most neglected preparation because there is no syllabus for essay. Also, the essays which have been asked in the past have been in the realm of philosophy, have been of abstract nature. So, there is no touch point when it comes to syllabus and essay. And therefore, as a result of that, essay gets neglected. Whereas, essay is the make or break for any game that you play in UPSC exam. You are definitely going to score this much. Trust me. With regular preparation and regular answer writing, you are going to be in this range. I can promise you that. But I can also promise you that you will never be able to crack your essay. And that is because of the fact that you neglect that part of your preparation. And even if you write essays, a lot of times the most conventional wisdom which is shared with the aspirants is that go and write previous year's papers. I absolutely laugh at that. I mean, yes, you should attempt previous year's papers, but should that be the only piece of advice that candidates should receive? Your optional is political science, your optional is maybe sociology, you're studying for history, geography. If you come to me and ask me, if I tender an advice that please go back to your previous year's papers and solve them, that makes sense because obviously the question on Plato, the question on Socrates, the question on Indo-US relationship is not going to change much. Sociological thinkers, Western political thinkers, Indian political thinkers, anthropologists, their work remains the same. So, UPSC's option to always ask new questions also it gets reduced. It is limited to the syllabus. And therefore, if UPSC is asking questions on Greek philosophy or if UPSC is asking question on liberty and John Stuart Mill in the last 30 years, they are bound to repeat the questions, right? If they are asking questions on Mughals, if they are asking questions on Marathas, the history never changes. History is static now. So, naturally, the questions are going to be recycled in these subjects where the syllabus is defined. be it geography, history, polity, economy, environment, art and culture, international relations, agriculture, science and tech. Yes, there is going to be an element of current affairs, but the basic understanding and the foundational pillars of the subjects are always going to remain the same. The questions are going to be recycled, maybe in a different format, maybe with a different, one can say, verbal library, but at the same time, the context, the substance and the character of the questions is not going to change. Therefore, it makes perfect sense to go back to previous year's papers and attempt your questions. That is a very, one can say, central pillar of your preparation. But when it comes to essay, every year there is a new set of essays which are asked. Every year, one can say the focus of the examiner is something else. And there is, as I said, there is no set pattern, there is no syllabus defined by UPSC itself. Correct? In that case, how much sense does it make to go? See, this is not the only advice that should be given to the candidates. Of course, at roundtable, we are going to discuss previous year's papers as well. But is that enough? Or does that add a good chunk to your preparation? The answer is an unfortunate no. Unequivocally, you will get an answer as no. Essay is not how well you write. Essay is about how well you think. Another thing, why cracking essay is difficult? The first thing is that it is at the most neglected part of the preparation because of, one can say, no mention of the syllabus. That's first. The second reason why essay becomes difficult is the fact that there is no scope for recovery. Now, what do you mean by recovery? Okay. When you talk about recovery in the essay, in GS papers, you have how many questions? You have 20 questions. Naturally, you are not going to perform consistently over all 20 questions. You might get some really good marks in some questions, you might get less marks, and then it will be averaged out, right? So, for example, if the first three questions in my GS paper 1, if I know that I have not done my best here, or I have been unable to put in my best answer over there, I know that I have a chance of recovery in the next 17 questions, right? That I will score heavily in the next 17 questions so as to make up for the lost marks in the first 3 questions. And it is even invariably going to happen. No UPSC aspirant or mains answer, one can say mains aspirant is capable of writing all 20 questions with the same degree of clarity and quality. So, obviously, that roller coaster ride is always going to be there. But in essay, you just have to write 2 essays. One essay in section A and one essay in section B. There are total 8 essays which are asked. So, when you are dealing with a situation like that, right, if you goof up in the first essay or if you goof up in the second essay, what chance of recovery do you have? Zero, zilch, nada. Which means that essay does not allow you to fail. Now, look at the conundrum here, look at the conflict here. The paper doesn't allow you to fail, and this paper is the most neglected part of the preparation. What a lethal combination. Naturally, it becomes the make or break. Now, why make or break? Because as I told you, everybody is in the range of 350 to 400 marks. So, it becomes very difficult to separate candidates here. Separation of the candidate happens because of essay. Very good candidates get also at times 70 and 80 marks. And there are few candidates who are capable of scoring 110, and there are few special ones who are capable of scoring 140 as well. You get a straight 30-40 mark advantage. There is a possibility that you can get a 40 mark advantage over a person who's scoring 100 marks. And if you can get a 40 mark advantage, that's a matter of life and death at UPSC. Right? From not getting selected, you could just, stratospherically rise like a phoenix and maybe land in the top 50 or the top 10 of the country. So, you have to understand the strategic importance of this paper, not just through the quantum of marks which are allocated to the paper. which is the same as other GS papers, right? So please avoid linear thinking in this matter. There is more complexity. Understand that complexity. Now, why we have learnt and understood that lack of syllabus, no scope for recovery, and the most neglected part of the paper. These are the three reasons why it becomes a very difficult paper to crack. Now, as I said, this is one of the easiest papers that you can sail past. It's a walk in the park. Trust me. Why? Again, same reason. There is no syllabus for it. It is not testing your answer writing. A lot of students feel that their language is being tested. Let me bust the myth here that your linguistic skills are not at test here. Okay. Now you would be flummoxed at this point and you would be wondering, if my linguistic skills are not put in test or are not under examination here, then what is being examined? What is being examined is your, as we can, what is being examined is your ideation. What is being examined is your critical thinking. What is being examined is your articulation. Ideation, critical thinking, and articulation. Ideation is about what kind of ideas do you apply on a given situation. I'll explain it to you. The lecture started a little late today, right? And I told you that the lecture started late because of incessant rains in Mumbai, right? What is the ideation for it? The ideation for it is urban flooding. So that means right ideas should come to you. That's the first thing that you should learn from this. The second thing, which is critical thinking, is urban flooding is going to be an ongoing phenomena. If it is an ongoing phenomena, what about the urban infrastructure? Is it not capable of managing urban flooding? Because बारिश तो आने ही वाली है, पानी तो भरने ही वाला है, और ये आपको एज एन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन पता ही है. So is our urban infrastructure incapable of managing urban flooding? If it is incapable of managing that, then what are the, one can say, reform measures being undertaken? Right? Critical thinking also must tell you that why does Mumbai receive so much rain as opposed to other cities? Because it is in the Konkan belt. So geography plays a huge role here, right? From public governance to geography, correct? And this year there is going to be intermittent rainfall, in the sense that at times it will pour down heavily, and at times there will be scant rainfall. What is it on account of? It is on account of El Nino related events. So that is climatic expressions and geography, right? At an individual level, what will you think? That if Rohan sir is conducting this lecture and if he lives in Mumbai and if he knows the ground reality in Mumbai, then why did he not wake up early? Why did not try to take a 1 hour buffer? So here you are now fixing the accountability with the individual. So behaviorism also comes in, right? Correct? There could be a social angle also. So critical thinking is about taking an idea and associating that idea with all possible strands and with all possible, one can say, arrows of thought. That is critical thinking. And why is critical thinking important? In my previous masterclass on answer writing, I have spoken eloquently in volumes about critical thinking. If you have not watched that masterclass, please subscribe to our channel and watch all our masterclasses from the past to avail benefit out of it. Okay. Critical thinking is required because you are going to be problem solvers of the society. What are civil servants? Civil servants are troubleshooters. Civil servants are problem solvers, because the society, our communities, our cities are always in a state of crisis, right? It could be a geographical crisis, it could be a food crisis, it could be a price crisis, it could be any crisis, a crisis of law and order. So, India as a country is in a state of crisis because of the huge mass of people, because of multiplicity of problems, because of multitude of interests, and because of the limited nature of administration. So, as future bureaucrats and as future administrators, you're always going to be troubleshooters and crisis managers of the society, which means that you will have to take critical decisions at critical moments in time. That means decision making is the first and the most important function that you will have to execute. Decisions, right? And a good decision is the one which is backed by a solid understanding of the situation, an all-round understanding of the situation. In our previous master classes, we learnt about the ABD approach or the 360-degree approach. When I have complete information, when my data points are enough to give me a sound foundation for taking any decisions, then that decision is bound to work in my favor. So, critical thinking, a civil servant, a bureaucrat has to be somebody who embodies that critical thinking, so that decision making does not suffer. When you go to a doctor, the decision to prescribe you a medicine is based upon critical thinking. You go to the doctor and you say that my stomach is aching, but the doctor won't just focus on your stomach. He will ask you about your dietary preferences. He will ask you about your, one can say, previous night's consumption. He might ask you about how you're feeling in your body, right? He might ask you about, is it paining here also? It is aching on the right side also, because he's checking whether the liver is in a state of inflammation or not. He will also check your eyes just to check if there is a case of jaundice or not, right? That means if a doctor has to prescribe you a medicine for your stomach ache, he has to check the entire body. That means if you want to solve a problem in a small city for a small community, you have to check the society and the community for all the other areas of possible concern, which could be related to history, geography, polity, economy of that region. That is critical thinking. That is what we call the ABD, the AB de Villiers approach. That is what we call as the 360-degree approach. That is critical thinking. So, you take an idea and you build a thesis around it. Okay? And the third thing is articulation. How well you articulate. Now, at civil service, why is articulation important? In two ways. Articulation is important is because you will see in the line and staff management of our bureaucracy, or the line and staff organizational structure of our bureaucracy, decisions are taken but with consensus. Decisions are taken and orders and instructions are given, right, on a piece of paper. So, you are not going to write a lot and send it over to your juniors or to your subordinates. You have to be precise in your writing. You have to be clear in what orders you want to issue, and you have to do that in less amounts of words. I told you in the last master class also, economy of words. See, everything has a logic at UPSC, right? Unfortunately, the teachers in our country are not telling the logic of anything, right? There is a logic for this answer writing. They want to check your critical thinking, ideation and articulation. Articulation should be such that you should be able to say more with less, economy of words. Yeah, I know in essay you are getting 1200 words, but sometimes even that is not enough, right? Articulation is expression. And basically essay also, just like the ethics paper, is your written interview. They are basically checking how well you build an argument, then how you defend that argument, and then how you conclude that argument. They are checking your personality through that argumentation of yours, for which you what is your means to reach that argument? Writing is a means to an end. The end is your thesis and your defense of that thesis, and writing is that means. Writing is your, one can say, sword. Articulation, expression is very important in every part of our life. I mean, I remember see, I mean, you also must have encountered the same experience, that a lot of times there's a lot of talk going about the love language. How do you express your love? Some people just write, some people just present acts of service. Some people use language. So there are various ways in which you express your love for the person. That is your love language. So everything requires a language. Without language, the message cannot be conveyed. And language is the most important part. In fact, if you ask me, language is the most important invention when it comes to humankind. If you allow me 2 minutes, I'll explain to you why language is the most important element or important invention of humankind. Is because language creates something called as legal fiction. Since we are on the topic of essay, you must know what is legal fiction, right? What is legal fiction? Let's take a look at that. What language creates legal fiction? Think about it like this. What is legal fiction and why language is the most important invention of humankind? If there are, one can say, if there is one gorilla in this room and if there is one me, naturally you know that the gorilla will overpower me. If there are two gorillas and two Rohans in the room, those two gorillas will also overpower me. If there are three gorillas and three Rohans in the room, result is going to be the same. 10 gorillas and 10 Rohans in the room, result is going to be the same. 100 gorillas and 100 Rohans in the room, now 100 Rohans will win. Why? Because human beings are accustomed to strategize, because human beings are thinking beings. Gorilla is also thinking being, but we are sentient beings, means our thinking power is much higher. So those 100 people in the room will coordinate and collaborate and strategize and somehow will, escape the room, escape death. What do you learn? How do you strategize? How do you coordinate? How do you communicate? Language. So language becomes a tool to execute human tasks. If language is the tool to execute human tasks, then it has to be the most important invention of humankind. Allow me to explain further. Allow me to elaborate further. I'll give it to you. 1 second. When you talk about language, 1,000 gorillas going to an A.R. Rahman concert, that will remain A.R. Rahman's last concert. But 1,000 people entering into an A.R. Rahman's concert, the concert goes smoothly. Why? The power of language. Somebody comes on to the stage and says mobile phones not allowed. You are given a ticket. The ticket has a set of instructions that the parking is in this lot, that entry to the venue is restricted till 7:30 p.m. So the ticket is using what? The instructions on the ticket are written in a language. And the show presenter is also using the power of language to guide and dictate the behavior of people coming to the show. So therefore, human beings have become the most evolved species on planet Earth is because of the power of language. Why? Because we are able to communicate with each other swiftly and then we can take targeted action. Swift communication leads to targeted action. That's why language. That's why the emphasis on communication and its expression. You go to and a lot of students come to me and say, sir, but then, even animals communicate. Even animals have a language. Well, I don't deny that. Animals communicate, but they don't have a language. They don't have a script. Right? You go to a national park or you go to a tiger reserve. How do you know that the tiger is sitting near the bushes or inside the bushes? That the tiger is moving along a ridge or along a valley is because the animals around that tiger will make a lot of noise. That is called as a call. A deer has a different call, a sambar has a different call, a monkey has a different call for the movement of tiger, and that's how the guide in the safari knows that the tiger is in the vicinity and that we are about to witness a majestic species which is going to go past across our gypsy. Yeah. But you just know that the tiger is around because of a monkey's quacking sound, because of the sambar stomping its feet. Yeah. So does that allow you to move? No, because you don't know where the tiger is. They are communicating with you. The animals are communicating with everybody in the ecosystem. But do you know, are they able to communicate the exact position of the tiger? No. But if there is a human being, and if that human being can see the tiger, they will tell you, right? That don't come here, the tiger is sitting. Or take a left, or take a right, or the tiger is sleeping now, you can come over. The tiger is moving in your direction, run away. Or the tiger is moving away from you, you can chase the tiger. Swift action is possible because of language. Not only we communicate, but we express through our language, right? The Darwinian principle of prey and predator relationship has contributed to the evolution of a lot of species, correct? We were also prey because we were not at the food chain in the African savanna. Then how did we survive? How have we survived in so many thousands of years? Is because of language. Language allows you to express what? Language allows you to express danger in clear terms. And once danger is expressed in clear terms, you can save yourself from that danger. Correct? So what do you understand from this is language is the most important element which has contributed to the evolution of humankind and has allowed us to survive. So why should UPSC not check that? Why should UPSC not check the power of your language? They don't want a Shakespeare. They don't want a, one can say Lord Byron. They don't want an Enid Blyton or a Ruskin Bond. They don't want literary geniuses, but they want people who can communicate the right ideas in the right form within a limited context. Therefore, expression is so important. One day you will fall in love. And when you do, please write a poem. Just don't type it on WhatsApp. Yeah, because your expression is a reflection of your character. How well you express shows how deeply you care and how deeply you think. A word of appreciation ideally should be sent by writing a not by writing a letter, not by sending a mail. Right? In the age of AI, in the age of digital communication, a personal form of communication shows special love, care, and effort. And when you are a public servant, that special love, care, and effort should also be directed towards human citizenry, the subjects of the region. There's a lot of logic. And I have still not talked about what is legal fiction. Right? We are Roundtable IAS. How do you know we are Roundtable IAS? For example, if there is no Rohan Dange, there is no staff, there is no lecture, then does Roundtable IAS exist or not? Let me give you a better example. All of us are fond of Mercedes, right? Most of us are. If there are no Mercedes cars on the road, if there is no Mercedes office in the entire country, if there is no staff, then does Mercedes as a company exist? That is my simple question. And the answer to that question is yes. Why? Because it exists on a piece of paper. It is a registered organization under the Companies Act. It has a GST number. So the organization does not exist in the form of cars. The organization does not exist in the form of a building or in the form of staff. The organization exists here in your mind. And what exists in the mind is fiction, not reality. And what gives a legal character to that fiction? Legal fiction, language, right? Law, contract, documentation. That is what gives a formal character and tangibility to any idea. I can go on and on about it. I can give you one more idea. Nation and state. A nation is a fictional idea. It is in the mind. I am an Indian, that's in my mind. But I use then language to give that fiction its reality. And therefore, when you write a constitution, the nation becomes a state. And constitution becomes the law of the land. And then you demarcate boundaries also. And then you obviously have your enumeration exercises to ascertain your demography and your population. All of this is possible because of language. So state is legal fiction and nation is just fiction, right? Language itself is fiction. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, X, Y, Z, 26 alphabets, 26 letters in the alphabets. Q, there cannot be a 27th, there cannot be a 28th. And why? Because it is fictional. I have decided that there are going to be 26 letters in the alphabet. It's in the mind. Mount Everest is not fiction, it's a reality. It's not in the mind. You can see, touch, and feel Mount Everest. Indian Ocean is reality, it is not fiction. But Roundtable IAS is fiction. Mercedes, BMW is fiction. The idea of a nation is fiction, it is in the mind. And whatever that is in the mind requires language so that it can get the character of legal fiction. Because of language, you have capitalists today. Dhirubhai Ambani, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, these have all become capitalists. The Britishers were the first colonizers. All of this is possible because of legal fiction. Why? Because everything is about business. Business is about what? Execution of contract. You pay me something, I give a service in return. If you pay me something and if I don't give you a service in return, then what will happen? It will be a violation of the contract, and contracts are written in language. Without a contract, is any business possible? No. If I violate the contract, then you will go to the state. You will file an FIR or you will go to the consumer grievance redressal mechanisms. All of these are covered under the Constitution of India. Constitution again is written in a language, legal fiction. See how important language is. See how important expression is. And that is the logic of the entire essay paper. The logic of the essay paper is to check your ideation, your critical thinking, and your expression. And let me tell you one thing, this might be an essay masterclass, but this masterclass will help you in understanding the ideas of life. The idea of life here is that please focus on writing, not just for the sake of cracking this exam, but for the sake of documenting your children's lives, for the sake of journaling for your own self, for the sake of writing love letters to your loved ones, for the sake of writing an appreciation letter to your parents, for the sake of just writing so that people know that you've taken enough amount of effort and you're showing enough amount of care for them. Just texting over WhatsApp or sending a mail is an excuse for your laziness, right? This world will never see a Shakespeare. This world will never see, one can say, a Michelangelo. This world will not see a Picasso. This world will not see Bertrand Russell. Because these are the people who focused on writing. These are the people who focused upon expressing. These are the people who focused on, giving wings to their physical and mental faculties through words. Our generation or the coming generations will not have that, is because now machines have taken over. AI has taken over. You have outsourced not your tasks to the machines. You have outsourced your humanity to machines. What makes you a human is your idea to express love, is the idea that you can express your anger, your resentment, your jealousy. What makes you human is that you can write poems. What makes you human is you can dance. What makes you human is you can sculpt, you can paint, you can express yourself. These are finer pursuits which make us humans and distinguish us from the machines, at least, which is what we experienced in the 19th and the 20th century. But going forward in the 21st century, in the third decade of the 21st century, we are witnessing now even these finer pursuits are taken by the machines now. What is the core of our humanity is now being outsourced to machines, and yet we expect to live as humans. That is setting off wrong expectation. And therefore, to conserve and preserve your own humanity, right? And only humans can become public administrators. Machines can never become public administrators, because public administrators require social empathy. Public administrators require social sensitivity and compassion. Empathy, sensitivity, and compassion is in the domain of humanity, not in the domain of AI and machine learning and deep learning. So as a public administrator, as a bureaucrat, you should be able to express yourself. And that is the logic of answer writing. That is the logic of writing at large in your life. Right. Today after the masterclass, just write a love letter. Because you're in that age, right? Or if you don't feel like that, write a letter on how you felt during the masterclass. Or write something for your mother. Write about the meal that you had today. A lot of students come to me, how do I go for my answer writing? And I have to unfortunately tell them that write. Start by beginning to express. Forget about this architecture of an essay. Forget about the pyramids of essay. वो तो सब कुछ दिया हुआ है आपको. You will be able to download the PDF, and I will obviously help you with my understanding. But even then, the the essence of answer writing is in expression. Express. Expression should not only in the paper. Expression should not be limited to the essay paper. Expression should be a form of your everyday life. When expression, linguistic expression becomes a form of your everyday life, do you really think that you will not be able to write in the exam? That is your training for the exam itself, is it not? And you know what? When you write more, you build ideas. Conduct this experiment. Do not trust me. Do this experiment by your own self. A lot of students come to me and say, sir, I am not prepared for essay, so I fear writing an essay. I want to destroy this mental block of students. Why? What are you scared of? Are heavens going to fall? Nothing is going to happen if you write a pathetic essay. Why? And I know that you're going to write a pathetic essay. You know that you're going to write a pathetic essay. But being pathetic is the first step towards excellence. आप गधे हो, ये सवाल है ही नहीं. आप गधे हो, मगर आप कितने बड़े गधे हो, ये सवाल है. और ये सवाल इसलिए इंपॉर्टेंट है बिकॉज आप कितने बड़े गधे हो आपको जब ये पता चलेगा, तो देन यू विल मूव टुवर्ड्स फ्रॉम बीइंग अ डोंकी टुवर्ड्स बीइंग अ हॉर्स, अ रेस हॉर्स. आप गड्ढे में गिरे और आप डिनाई कर रहे हो कि मैं गड्ढे में हूं ही नहीं, तो आप निकलोगे कैसे बाहर? मगर आपने एक्सेप्ट कर लिया कि यस आई मीन अ डिच, और इस दिस डिच इज अबाउट 12 फीट. नाउ आई नो दैट आई हैव टू जंप 12 फीट टू गेट आउट ऑफ इट. तो सवाल ये है ही नहीं कि आप कितना अच्छा आंसर लिख सकते हो. सवाल ये है कि आप आंसर लिख क्यों नहीं रहे हो जब आपको पता ही है कि आप गड्ढे में हो. व्हेन यू नो दैट यू आर इन अ डिच, स्टार्ट राइटिंग. The first step towards getting better is incremental progress, and that incremental progress never stops. Please understand what I'm saying. Understand why UPSC wants IAS officers and IPS officers to be able to write. It is not because they want the next Shakespeare. It is not because they want the next Premchand. They want people who have their humanity alive, who can express their social sensitivity and compassion. And therefore, writing should always writing should become an integral part of every human being's life. It keeps you sane. It keeps you human. And more thoughts come to you. When you sit today and start writing previous year's essay, you know what magic will happen? The magic that will happen is that the ideas you never thought would visit you, they will start visiting you. They will start knocking on the door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. And that is heavenly, my dear friends, when you start writing and expressing those ideas. अरे बैठो तो सही, लिखो तो सही, करके तो देखो, हो जाएगा. आपकी यूनिवर्सिटी ने आपको फेल होने के लिए तैयार किया है ना, क्योंकि एग्जाम में इस यूनिट 1 से क्वेश्चन आएगा और मैंने यूनिट 1 नहीं पढ़ा है तो मैं फेल हो जाऊंगा. इसलिए रट के जाओ, जस्ट वॉमिट इट ओवर देयर एंड गेट एक्सीलेंट मार्क्स, गेट एन आउटस्टैंडिंग रिजल्ट. I'm sorry, but essay paper doesn't function like that. It is not restricted to a syllabus. It checks how well you think, how original ideas come to you. And original ideas means you're not restricting yourself by syllabus. Original ideas mean you're not restricting yourself by units and syllabus and chapters. Original ideas means that you are like a child in a bull shop. Original ideas means that you are running across a unlimited meadow of grasslands with gay abandon. जहां जाना है जा सकते हो आप. That is called as thinking. बैठ के तो देखो, लिख के तो देखो, करके तो देखो, हो जाएगा. Start writing from today. Write anything. Ideas will start knocking on your door. even ideation. And see, attend these master classes from a perspective of developing ideas itself. Abhi aapne, I don't know whether you noticed or not, a lot of ideas were shared with you. The difference between nation and state, what is legal fiction, the power of language, what is critical thinking. So if you pay attention, a lot of ideas are already being shared with you during this essay hour, which can be used in your other essays also. Ideas are not restricted by topics. Topics do not have exclusive rights over those ideas. Any idea can be retrofitted anywhere as long as it is applicable. So pay attention in these master classes. I am going to give you a lot of food for thought and a lot of ideational ammunition that you can fire in the exam. Be with me, right? Critical thinking, ideation, and articulation. And suffice to say that this cannot be developed over a, this cannot be developed in 10 days, 15 days. It takes 2 to 3 months. And therefore, we are launching a course on essay on the 7th of July. I suggest you join that course. It is a very comprehensive course which runs in more than 60 hours, which will give about mentorship, hand-holding assistance, and developing ideas. Not just for your essay, a lot of ideas will be developed for your ethics paper also, right? So go to our website and subscribe to the course. If we move with the class today, I mean, if we talk about the master class on essay, we have built a pyramid of the great UPSC essay. What is this pyramid? Answer the question, form a thesis, right? Build the argument, arrange the argument, one job per paragraph, analysis, nuance, and rhythm. I will explain every stratification or every level on this pyramid to you, which is about deconstructing essay writing, which is also about bringing a systematic type of preparation to your essay challenge, right? Preparation cannot be just mindless. गधा मजूरी नहीं करनी है हमको. Preparation always has to be directed, well directed, and has to be, one can say, has to have goalposts. It should have a character, right? So let's begin. If we talk about the architecture of a great essay, first is obviously answer the question, understand, decode, and focus, right? UPSC asked a very, one can say, a peculiar essay in 2025. Let's take a look at that. Okay. The paper was, the essay was, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. See, this is previous year's paper. Huh? This is just UPSC 2025. एक साल पहले पूछा हुआ है. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Understand what is the question here. Because unless you identify the question, you will never be able to answer the question. Now see, this is a visual trap. Why would I say a visual trap? Is because a lot of students will focus and will identify war, will identify fighting, right? So the supreme art of war and fighting, that will capture your one can say, your visuals will capture that. Yeah, right? That is how we are designed. The moment words like war, killing, martyrdom, military, defense, fighting, the moment these words appear in paragraphs and sentences, we kind of consume them. So subconsciously what is happening in this essay is you're thinking of war. Subconsciously what is happening in this essay is that you're thinking of fighting. You will end up writing more about war and you will end up writing more about fighting than not fighting. And this essay is about not fighting. You know what is the question that they are asking? They are asking, is diplomacy possible in today's world? And that is the supreme art of war. See, understand what is the crisis that the world is going through. UPSC is a reflection of the world and the country. and the concern for the planet and the concern for the country. In 2025, what is the concern? The concern is peace, because peace is the first casualty. The concern is sovereignty of nations, because that is encroached upon. The concern is stability. The concern is humanitarian rights, right? Peace is the foremost concern of the world today. So, if such an essay is being asked, this essay naturally talks about Russia-Ukraine crisis. It naturally talks about the genocide which is happening in Gaza. It naturally talks about all the wars which have happened in the past and all the genocides which have happened in the past, like the Vietnam War and the Rwandan genocide and the Congolese genocide. It obviously also refers to, one can say, bilateral exchange of fire between India and Pakistan, border skirmishes between India and China, a possible war between China and Taiwan, or the Chinese incursion into Taiwan. It obviously talks about, it was asked in 2025, so there was a possibility that the Israelis would go to war against Iran, which eventually happened. The concern for global leadership and global governance today is global peace and stability. And the global peace and stability can only be achieved not through war, but through diplomacy. Always remember how nations compete with each other, how nations coordinate with each other, how nations collaborate with each other is determined by diplomatic relations. Diplomacy is the first tool of engagement. Diplomacy is the instrument of any nation's foreign policy. Diplomacy is the formal way of conducting your foreign policy on international platforms. Diplomacy is the first method by which you collaborate. And this world, this 21st century world, for this world, there is no alternative other than diplomacy. Diplomacy is dialogue, deliberation, and discussion, right? But today, diplomacy has failed. You know war? War is a symptom of diplomacy's failure. That is war. When diplomacy collapses, war is triggered. A war is like fever. You know what happens when there is inflammation or infection in human body? There are certain antibodies which are triggered and they are fighting a war against that infection, against that virus, against that inflammation. And because there is a, one can say, a struggle or a friction going on between these, one can say, viruses and antibodies, the body's temperature rises. The planet's temperature is rising today and war is happening today because diplomacy has failed, and therefore war is a symptom of a larger disease, and the larger disease is failure of diplomacy. This is the central question. This is the, one can say, this is where students need to talk more in this essay. But students will invariably talk more about wars, right? So you have to answer the question. You know, additionally, I will say that UPSC would be greatly, they would like it if there are certain references that you are able to make. Now, this is optional. Either you know it or you don't know it. It is not going to lead to the reduction in marks, but it can definitely lead to, one can say, addition of more marks. How? Art of War is written by whom? Art of War as a book is written by Sun Tzu. It's a very famous book. It's a book on statecraft. It's a book on diplomacy. It's a book on warcraft. So when you say warcraft and everything else, you realize that it is all about fighting. No, it's not about fighting. It's about winning the battle without fighting. Yeah. How do you win the battle without fighting? You win the battle without fighting by using psychological warfare, by using discourse warfare, by using information warfare. That is called as, or by using leverages. There are certain leverages in foreign policy. One of the leverages in foreign policy is the leverage of sanctions. You know what is sanctions? Sanctions is when an entire country is not allowed to engage in trade and commerce with other countries. Iran and Russia have been the most sanctioned countries in the world. So US and UN have collectively used the lever and instrument of sanctions to punish Iran and Russia. Well, when we talk about foreign policy, we talk in a very impersonal manner. But when you say that a country is being punished, it is actually who is being punished? The people. And how are people being punished? When there is no trade and commerce, economic activity is at a, one can say, is sluggish. And because economic activity is sluggish, the economy slips into recession. And from a recession into a slowdown, which leads to more job losses, which leads to even price rise at times. Eventually, disposable incomes of the people drop down, people start falling below poverty lines. You won the war. Because if you cripple an economy, then any nation cannot go to war. That has been an age-old wisdom. That has been the conventional wisdom that we have learned through our history books. Without firing a single bullet, you have destroyed an entire country. Now, why you could not destroy Iran and Russia is a different case study altogether, and I would love to take it with you. But other countries also which have been under the regime of sanctions, they have failed miserably in their economic policies, and as a result of that, their economies collapsed, their people sunk below poverty lines, and that led to more military dictatorships and authoritarianism in those countries, which means political failure, which means erasure of democracy, which means destruction of democratic credentials and preambular values. That's how you destroy a country. That's war. Did I fire a single bullet? No. Of course I did not. So the supreme art of war is basically subdue the enemy without fighting. Even the Britishers did it. Robert Clive, after the Battle of Plassey and Battle of Buxar, what did the British do? The British went treaty shopping. What did they do? The colonial powers, the British imperial colonial powers in India focused on treaty shopping. Why? Because by the 19th century or by the advent of the 18th century, the Britishers had realized that wars are an expensive exercise. Look at the three Carnatic wars. Look at the wars with Mughals. Look at the wars with other sultans. Look at the wars with the Marathas. Even if you win the war, you lose the war. War is an expensive exercise and everybody is a loser in the war. Look at Israel or Iran-US war. Everybody lost. Even if you declare US or Iran as the winner today, nobody is the winner. Everybody is a loser, including Indians and including all the people across the globe who are suffering from war-led inflation. War is the defeat of everyone. Conventional war, where firepower is exchanged. So if you want to subdue the enemy, there are other methods and other levers that you can deploy to subdue your enemy. Like the Britishers did treaty shopping, doctrine of lapse. If you do not have a biological son as an heir to the throne, naturally that throne will go into the hands of the Britishers. Doctrine of lapse. That meant subordination of the Indian rulers and the kings and the princes to the British might. Right? So without firing a single bullet, eventually the Britishers took over majority of the country. Because they also understood that war is an expensive exercise. We don't want to indulge in that. So war, see what happens, I'll tell you. Because it's a sensational exercise, because human beings have this, get this perverse pleasure from action. देखो आप देखते ही हो ना, Avengers, Marvel, DC Comics, Batman, Superman. Why do you watch? Because we as human beings have been conditioned over millennia to derive pleasure from other humans and their misery, or derive pleasure from things which are beyond our scope. See, we have always been told, na, do not fight, do not fight. So when people fight, we like it. Human beings are like that. Now again, that's a psychological spectrum which I would not like to indulge in today. But war is, when war becomes drama, when war becomes theater, it only becomes a matter of entertainment. Operation Sindoor, entire India cheered for it, except for the families of those soldiers who were involved in it. Because for them, that war is not just theater and drama, and that war is not an excuse to show your, is not a occasion to show your patriotism or even your jingoism. Their sons, their brothers, their father's life is at stake. But everybody in India is putting it on it on their WhatsApp status. Why? Because for us, war has always been a drama, a source of entertainment, a source of perverse pleasure. Let us not deny that. Suffice to say, this essay is about how to avoid war. And a lot of students will write about war. They will unnecessarily digress into situations where they'll end up talking more about war than the necessity to avoid the war. Therefore, I said that this is a visual trap. There is so much of talk about fighting and war in this that invariably you will end up writing that. And by the way, when we were discussing it, we discussed a lot many things like the what is the meaning of war, what is the meaning of diplomacy. We've also learnt about one can say the power of sanctions. We've learnt about Sun Tzu, right? So pay attention is my only request to you at this moment. So answer the central question. Understand, decode and focus. A lot of times I'll tell you what happens with a lot of candidates. Outstanding essays are distinguished not by the amount of information they contain, but by their unwavering commitment to the question. यही होगा ये सुप्रीम आर्ट ऑफ वॉर वाले क्वेश्चन में. That unnecessarily you will talk a lot about war, but you will not talk a lot about diplomacy, peace, global peace, and other ways to, other ways to solve problems which can otherwise, which should not be solved through war. So digressions बहुत होते हैं यूपीएससी एसेज में ना. digressions के लिए बहुत स्कोप रहेगा. You think that you've written a very good essay, but unfortunately you will digress a lot in that essay. I'll give you an example. There was an essay, I don't remember the year now, but there was an essay asked in the early 2000s, and the essay was good fences make good neighbors. Okay, good fences make good neighbors. A lot many UPSC candidates at that point in time understood. I think, pardon me if I'm wrong, but it should be around 2008, 2009. Okay, I mean, I could be wrong here, so do not take it at face value. Do your own Google search. But this essay was asked. Perhaps in the light of the India-Pakistan skirmish, because 2008 is the year when those horrible terror attacks were executed on Mumbai, and the entire country was in a state of shock. It was a dastardly act committed by the neighboring nation, wherein certain non-state actors could rummage through the streets of Mumbai like a juggernaut and annihilate and bring the entire city to a halt. It still serves as a painful and a poignant memory for all of us. So UPSC ने उससे क्वेश्चन पूछा तो a lot many students, and quite rightly, they realized that this could be about India and Pakistan. So they wrote about India and Pakistan relationship. Good fences make good neighbors. लिखना चाहिए. You should write about India and Pakistan. There is no doubt about it. Yeah. But at the same time, don't digress too much. लिखते लिखते क्या होगा बच्चों का? They started talking about terrorism. They started talking about non-state actors. They started talking about insurgency. They started talking about Maoism. A lot many things were spoken. Eventually, you have only 1200 words at your disposal. You have to be judicious and prudent in the use of these words. You can mention India, Pakistan, but you have to understand that again, what is the central theme? What is the central question? The question is not just about good neighbors. The question is also about good fences. What about that? आपको फेंस के बारे में भी तो लिखना है, राइट? सो व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट द फेंस, जस्ट गिव मी अ मोमेंट. Good fences make good neighbors. This can also be about not just India, Pakistan, but this is about India's borders, right? What is a border? Border, it separates, it demarcates one from the other. And that separation and demarcation between two can be between two countries, can be between two communities, can be between two states, can be between two societies, can be between two cultures, can be between two individuals as well. Why is a border only seen from the lens of geopolitics or from the lens of India Pakistan? A border is also when you start disengaging with a person and have your own border, right? Why are you not exploring those areas? Again, ideation. यहाँ पे missing क्या है? Ideation. And if there is no ideation, there will be no critical thinking. India's borders, if you look at it, I'll give you some food for thought again, because I just don't want my students to come to the masterclass and just go back with a very theoretical understanding. I want my students to feel enriched and feel that some value was added to the lecture. And therefore, I use all these nuances and these intellectual inputs so that your 2 hours, which are very crucial and one can say critical for me, are used judicially. So allow me to focus on more concepts here. What is the nature of India's borders? The nature of India's borders is that we have porous borders. India has porous borders. And therefore, I say that India is one of the most cursed countries in the world. Why is India one of the most geographically cursed countries in the world? See, last night, I was actually scrolling, just like you, I also doom scroll at times. And there was this reel which talked about Queensland in New Zealand, which is perhaps a heaven on earth. The most picturesque town, the most beautiful, the most amazing city in terms of its geography, in terms of its sylvan surroundings. If you can come across it, it is definitely Queensland. And the reel said that geographical luck is also a thing. Yes, of course. Imagine people who were born in Queensland. Imagine people who were born in New Zealand. They are born in mother's lap, right? Such a pristine country, such a pristine city, such salubrious environments, right? And I was thinking, and I'm born in India. See, we personalize every reel, okay? I'm born in India. And I was thinking because I teach international relations, I tend to go into the direction of international relations. That if I'm born in India, what luck does India carry? India does not carry any luck. India carries a curse. You have a border with Pakistan, which is obviously under tension. You have a border with Myanmar, which is one can say, which is an undemarcated border because it is the most densely forested area in the world. And a lot of Maoists and a lot of anti-India elements funded by the Chinese enter India through the India-Myanmar corridor. In fact, if you watch the movie Uri, उसमें जो पहला scene है, there's an ambush on the CRPF convoy that is happening in that area itself. Only locals have the knowledge. Even CRPF and other border management forces do not have knowledge, topographical knowledge of that region. Then you talk about Bangladesh. 1 million people enter from Bangladesh into India every year, and maybe more. Cape Verde, which actually kicked out Argentina from FIFA World Cup almost. The population of Cape Verde is 5 lakh. 2 Cape Verdes from Bangladesh are exported to India every year because of the porosity of the borders. We have a border with Nepal, and the Kathmandu corridor is known as a corridor from where a lot of terrorists come into India. That corridor is infamous for human trafficking. That corridor is infamous for the incoming of all contraband into India, like narcotics. And then, of course, you have China, with which you have had an age-old relationship in terms of a unresolved border issue. You have Sri Lanka, with which you have had you were engaged in a civil war, and of course India lost one of its prime ministers, Rajiv Gandhi, to the LTT-led civil war in Sri Lanka, which is one of the bloodiest civil wars in the world. So all around India, if you say Afghanistan also has a border with India along the Wakhan corridor, then of course Afghanistan has been Talibanized. So India has been surrounded by what? By anti-India states, or non-democratic states, or an enemy brother, or an enemy neighbor. Such is the border of India. And therefore I salute the Ministry of External Affairs and the people who orchestrate our foreign policy, because to navigate in this environment and climate is not easy. And India remaining intact in this region as a democracy itself is a miracle. Always remember, value your country. Value the country you're born in, especially if it's India, because we have survived despite and in spite of our geography. And since 1947 up until 2026, we have had a Ministry of External Affairs, we have had a foreign policy which has taken us forward. And it is not just about survival now. India is a thriving democracy in the world. It is upon us to choose the right leaders who can take forward this legacy and build a nation of reckoning and build a nation for 1.5 billion people and secure their interests. तो जब आप बॉर्डर की बात कर रहे हैं, चाइना के साथ तो आपका बॉर्डर डिमार्केटेड ही नहीं है, बिकॉज हिमालय से आ रहा है. पाकिस्तान के साथ आपका थार डेजर्ट से बॉर्डर स्टार्ट होता है, जहां पे इंसान जा नहीं सकते, राइट. आपका बंगाल की तरफ भी एक बॉर्डर आता है, सुंदरबन डेल्टा, विच इज द लार्जेस्ट डेल्टा इन द वर्ल्ड. पीपल कैन हार्डली वेट थ्रू द वाटर्स ऑफ सुंदरबन. तो जब बॉर्डर, आपका पहला क्वेश्चन तो ये है कि बॉर्डर में फेंसिंग क्यों नहीं है. बॉर्डर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, विच इज द मोस्ट बेसिक फॉर्म ऑफ बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट, इवन दैट इज एब्सेंट बिकॉज ऑफ जोग्राफिकल चैलेंजेस. So what is a good fence? A good fence should be high enough to keep the danger outside. But a good fence should also be low enough, or should have provision for opening if you want to shake hands. मतलब टेररिस्ट को बाहर रखना है, at the same time बाकी देशों के साथ you need to have bilateral trade, you need to have bilateral investment treaties, you need to have people to people contacts, you need to have the, one can say, free inflow and outflow of FDIs or FIIs rather. What is a good fence? A good fence in the parlance of international relations should have enough maneuvering space for bilateral economic engagement, for bilateral civilizational engagement, for bilateral cultural engagement. And the fence should be strong and high enough to keep out anti-state actors, non-state actors, terrorists and insurgents and smugglers and other members of the organized crime cartels. That is a good fence. And therefore a good fence is a metaphor also. Why only in international relations? Critical thinking means that in this essay you can write about international relations, you can write about the porous borders of India, but at the same time you should extend your understanding to other facets of life. What are the other facets of life? The fact that so many religions live together in India. They are also your neighbors, right? For a Hindu, a Muslim is a neighbor. For a Muslim, a Sikh is a neighbor. For a Sikh, a Buddhist is a neighbor. Remember one thing, when we say India is a country which embodies cultural diversity, or we have unity in diversity, this diversity of identities is also, one can say, a demarcation. Religious demarcation, ethnic demarcation, even racial demarcation is there in our country, and yet we cohabit. Which means what? Which means that I will celebrate, if I am a Hindu, I will celebrate all the festivals with the Buddhists and the Sikh and the Christians and the Muslims. But at the same time, I will not interfere in their essential religious practices. And I will lend my respect to that. The idea of India is this. The idea of India is the idea of what? Is the idea of cohabitation. And what kind of cohabitation? Peaceful cohabitation. I keep on telling my students, India is a well cooked biryani. And America is a Greek salad. ठीक है? I'll explain this. See, इसमें भी काफी food for thought है, literally and metaphorically both. बिरयानी आप जब खाते हैं, मटन बिरयानी, right? So it has so many ingredients which go into the making of a biryani. But when you are having that biryani, you cannot single out. Okay, now I'm tasting this condiment now. I'm tasting this spice now. You get a final product, which is a derivation of all the intermingling and all the interplay of all the ingredients which went into the making and the one can say elaborate preparation of that biryani, right? But a Greek salad is something that you can selectively eat. You can see that this is paneer, this is a chicken, this is lettuce, this is carrot, these are beans. You can take whatever you want. You can distinguish one from the other. America as a culture is like that. In America, there are China towns, there are Italian towns, there are towns which belong to Indians, there are towns which belong to Japanese. America is a melting pot of cultures, but those cultures are starkly demarcated from each other, right? India is a well cooked, well marinated, slowly cooked biryani where you cannot tell one from the other. By the face of it, can you tell if a person is a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Christian? No. Yes, but if they are wearing something or if their practices are on display, then only you can say that. And therefore the बिरयानी में भी आप क्या कर सकते हो? आप ये भी कह सकते हो मैंने सिर्फ चावल की बिरयानी बनाई, नहीं, आपको मीट तो डालना ही पड़ेगा, राइट? क्या आप ये बोल सकते हो कि नहीं, आई विल नॉट पुट मसालाज इनटू दिस? नो, मसाला तो डालना ही पड़ेगा, ब्रिश्ता तो डालना ही पड़ेगा, राइट? दही से मैरिनेट तो करना ही पड़ेगा. नहीं करोगे तो फाइनल टेस्ट में प्रॉब्लम आएगी. इंडिया वही है. इंडिया इज अ वेल कुक बिरयानी which is nothing but a coming together of all the religions and cultures, right? And that is the great Indic Renaissance. Okay, but फिर भी हमारे यहाँ good fences है. We do not interfere, and at the same time we engage. Engagement and interference are two different things, right? I go to my Muslim friend's house on Eid and enjoy sheermal and biryani, but I don't question their religious practices, neither do I condemn their religious practices, and vice versa. They celebrate Diwali with me, but they will never condemn me for the religion that I profess. And this idea of India must survive. And this idea of India must be taken forward. Because this is what is the definition of India, peaceful cohabitation. Why is it possible? Because we have good fences. And because therefore our good fences allows us to be good neighbors. Right? Kitne areas mein? So answering this question is not really very difficult, as long as you have an unwavering commitment to the question. पहले हमने क्या क्वेश्चन आइडेंटिफाई किया. आइडेंटिफाई क्या किया? हर बार वॉर जरूरी नहीं है. डिप्लोमेसी कैन बी यूज्ड, अदर टूल्स कैन बी यूज्ड, राइट? हमने क्या क्वेश्चन आंसर किया कि यार गुड फेंसेस है, गुड नेबर्स है. मतलब क्या है कि देयर इज अ सेंस ऑफ डिस्टेंस एंड देयर इज एन अलाउंस टू एक्चुअली एंगेज एज वेल. दैट इज अ गुड फेंस, not only in the realm of international relations but in the realm of nation building also, right? And then you start talking about and defining what is a good fence, right? आपका argument centrality, central theme of your essay should be around that good fence, not just India Pakistan relationship, which a lot of students did. Okay, so right understanding is the foundation of the right answer, right? I have adequately demonstrated that. Now you have to form a thesis. I think I have discussed already about it, but again I will repeat it. What is a thesis? The thesis is कि आपने एक आइडिया ले ली गुड फेंस, उसको आपने इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया. एंड व्हाई इज अ गुड फेंस क्रिटिकल फॉर द वर्ल्ड टुडे? व्हाई इज अ गुड फेंस क्रिटिकल फॉर इवन ग्लोबल वार्मिंग एंड क्लाइमेट चेंज? व्हाई इज अ गुड फेंस क्रिटिकल फॉर अ पीसफुल नेबरहुड? व्हाई इज अ गुड फेंस क्रिटिकल फॉर coexisting, one can say peaceful coexistence of nations? What is this? A thesis, right? आइंस्टाइन ने प्रॉब्लम आइडेंटिफाई किया था ना, राइट? और प्रॉब्लम आइडेंटिफाई करने के बाद व्हाट डिड ही डिफेंड और व्हाट आइडिया डिड ही प्रपोज? The idea that Einstein proposed was E is equal to mc square. But he has to prove that idea. He will prove that idea through a thesis. He will build a thesis around it, right? Sigmund Freud talked about what? Sigmund Freud talked about the power of dreams in his book called as Interpretation of Dreams. That book is a very voluminous book where he talks about all different personality types and how different personality types have different types of dreams. Okay, and of course vice versa. It is a book based on psychoanalysis of human beings. Karl Marx talked the idea of classless society. Karl Marx also talked about the idea of a stateless society. But in which book? Das Kapital. So Das Kapital, Interpretation of Dreams. What are all this? These are basically theses which actually support an idea. Now that idea could be an E is equal to mc square. That idea could be a classless society and a stateless society. Charles Darwin gave the principle of evolution, right? And he wrote a book out of it. That is the thesis, right? Your PhD has a title. Your PhD submission has a title. You have decoded the answer, you have identified the question, and then you submit the PhD, your dissertation. That is the thesis. So building a thesis means what, right? And by the way, this thesis acts as the intellectual compass that guides every paragraph. Okay. Means when I talk about, like for example, let's take one more essay here. Morals are for those who can feed themselves. Okay. Morals are for those who can feed themselves. Now you have to build a thesis on it. पहला stage हमारा क्या था? The first step was identifying the question and then building an answer. What is the question? That morals cannot be made universally applicable on everyone. So in the introductory part, you have to define morals. Correct? Now that you have identified the question, that morals cannot be made applicable in a similar way on everyone. Right? What is morality? Morality gives you the difference between right and wrong. Correct? But unfortunately, everybody's reality is different. My reality is different than yours. Somebody else's reality is different than others. So their idea of what constitutes right and wrong is also different. So for every individual, that moral line could be different, could possibly be different. Right? See, murdering someone, assassinating someone, यहाँ पे तो मामला clear between right and wrong, right? But when it comes to very complex matters, right? What are the complex matters? When it comes to gender parity in India today, when it comes to news coverage in India today, when it comes to the definition of sustainable development, ideas are very complex. For Indian, sustainable development is different. For American, sustainable development is different. So these complex ideas require a lot of contextual understanding and nuance. Long story short, morals will be different for different people. The idea of joy. If you ask me, sir, what is your idea of joy? Today, my idea of joy is to deliver the same lecture and to see you all in physical presence, attending my lecture in an auditorium of 500 people. That is pure joy to me. To have the privilege of interacting with intelligent young blood like you. But for somebody, if you ask them, what is joy to you? For somebody, it could just be reaching home on time in this terrible Mumbai monsoons. अब monsoons की आप बात करो. For people like us, when we sit in our balcony and enjoy a sip of coffee, monsoons are beautiful. Imagine somebody who's living in a slum area, for them monsoons are war itself. They dread the very idea of monsoons. So our ideas are quite definitive, and that definition of ideas is actually a byproduct of the ecosystem that we inhabit. Coming back to the essay, therefore, morality cannot be made universally applicable on everyone in the same way. Everybody's morality could be a different version of theirs. Okay. So आपने identify कर लिया. अब आपका क्या है? You have to form a thesis. Why? Because morals are for those who can feed themselves. अब feed themselves पे जाना है आपको. This is the next step. Right? Morality defines what? Morality defines right conduct for human beings. Correct? Right conduct for human beings. Correct? For example, you will teach your children the value of sharing and caring. Be it toys, be it food, be it sweets, be it chocolate, right? You teach your children the, one can say, the moral dividend of sharing and caring. A child born in a poor family below poverty line, if you give that child struggles for even 2 square meals per day, has never eaten a chocolate, but has seen people eat cakes and chocolate. If you give that child a chocolate, can you expect that child to share it? Well, that child could share it, I'm not denying it, but there is a possibility that that child will not share that chocolate. Why? Because for that child, for that poor kid, that chocolate is not an everyday affair. That cake is not an everyday privilege. Okay? So it's an unfair expectation to believe that people below the poverty line will believe also in the moral of right, one can say sharing and caring. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. Well, you know, Hindi movies, because I mean, of course, I'm almost double your age, so I have been watching Hindi movies since a long time. तो पहले 70s, 80s, 90s में ना एक डायलॉग हुआ करता था मूवीज में कि कोई चोर अपनी माँ के पेट से चोर पैदा नहीं होता, कोई डाकू अपनी माँ की कोख से डाकू पैदा नहीं होता. ये तो हालात उसको बना देते हैं. हालात मतलब क्या? इकोसिस्टम, द कॉन्टेक्स्ट, राइट? So I see, when you see a train, you're going in a reserved compartment. The moral is that if you have reservation, you will have claim on that seat for the next 12 hours. But have you ever boarded a train to Bihar during Diwali from Surat or from Ahmedabad? The idea of a ticket gets completely erased out over there. It becomes irrelevant. Why? People just want to reach home for their Chhat Puja or for their Diwali. And there are limited number of trains working in India, and there is limited number of general seats in India. They cannot afford AC compartments. They cannot afford reservation. Look at how they go. They travel to these states almost like cattle, in which there is a lot of stampede, in which there is a lot of physical hurt, in which there is, these are absolutely inhuman conditions to travel. So the morality of reservation, the morality of ticketing, the whole rationale and the logic of ticketing and reservation gets lost over there. तो वहां पे आप क्या moral समझाओगे लोगों को कि आप ही की जगह पे बैठो, आप यहाँ पे don't spit here, don't abuse people. They will have to abuse people. Unfortunately, the situation is such that if you don't kick the other person out, they will kick you out. It is the law of the jungle in the train. In the law of the jungle, the spirit of the law does not persist. It does not survive. So again, morals are for those who can feed themselves. That means people who are comfortably placed in life. Feeding again here is a metaphor. When you build a thesis here, you will have to talk about public health. You will have to talk about education. Morals are for those who can feed themselves. Today, I'll just give you a case study here. Allow me to give you one more food for thought. In India, we talk about something called as the gender enrollment ratio. Okay. So when we speak of the gender enrollment ratio, it basically is about bringing gender parity to all the genders in our society, correct? And making education accessible and affordable for all genders in our society, correct? Which means women and which means members of the third sex, correct? Ab, activists, social commentators, and even public policy makers and politicians, they make the right kind of noises. I'm not denying that. When they when they uh, when they lament the fact that enrollment of women in India is at an abysmal level, dropout rates again amongst women in India at the level of education are very high, at the level of primary education and secondary education are very high. So we need more girls to be brought to schools. We need more schools. We need more schools. The whole idea is about having more schools and more schools. Yeah. So education and bringing education to the doorstep of every individual is the moral here. But a lot many times you see that the government school is available. Teachers are also, by the way, reporting on time, unlike me. But you know what happens? Even then the girls, a lot many times even boys are not attending schools, is because after careful examination and systematic intellectual investigation, it came to light that parents themselves were not sending their kids to schools because they want their kids to go to a granary or to go to some sort of civil job. They want their children to be deployed at some place so that they can bring money into the house. So the question was not about what? The question was not about education. The question was about disposable income of a family. The question was about lack of employability of the parents. The question was about lack of sustainable sources of livelihoods and incomes. The question was about farm distress because it is a farmer's child. If the monsoon doesn't perform, the farmer's child will be put out of the school. तो उसको कहाँ आप बता रहे हो कि नहीं यार एजुकेट करो अपने बच्चों को? And then in the state of Tamil Nadu, a couple of decades ago, a few IAS officers, yes, IAS officers, see the kind of change you can bring into the system. They devised a scheme called as the midday meal scheme. And when they devised this scheme called as the midday meal scheme, what really happened was, देखो देखने के लिए हमको लगता है कि this is a scheme which is focused on what? Food security and nutritional support. But the midday meal scheme was, yes, of course, it was about food security and nutritional support of children, but it was largely targeted towards bringing children into the school. That listen, we will give your child one hot steaming meal and one take home meal if that child comes to the school, right? So the whole case study of midday meal scheme tells us that yes, morals are for those who can feed themselves, and once you started feeding them, then they started entertaining the moral of education. This is your thesis. This is how you build your thesis, right? Africa. While you are building your thesis, why restrict your understanding to India? Why not take it all over the world? And why not demonstrate it to the examiner that look, I can do a lot, I can write a lot. You better give me 140 marks, and they will. Write about Africa also. Africa, you know what is the irony of Africa? The irony of Africa is that Africa is the most mineral rich continent in the world, and it is also the most poor continent in the world. It is an irony hiding in plain sight. Most mineral wealthy and yet the poorest in the world, right? When you speak of Africa today, a lot of UN organizations, a lot of peacemakers, a lot of international organizations like Amnesty International, organizations for international governance, poverty eradication, disease eradication, all these platforms working in Africa today, they absolutely lament the fact that children are actually picking up guns, right? African wars and African civil wars have always found somehow a space in the front page news of the Western media. The gun culture in Africa has always found its space in the Western media. Shambolic state of living and disease prevalence have always found its prominence in mainstream media, which is what we have consumed, right? But if you try to understand, this thing in greater detail, you will realize that again, morals are for those who can feed themselves, boss. Why is a child in Africa picking up a gun instead of a book? Why why do you find instances of more mugging and more thefts and more robberies in Africa? Is because the entire continent is poor. You cannot teach morality to them. They have to feed themselves first. They have to their infants are dying. New mothers are dying. They are not lactating. There is a higher incidence of, one can say, malnutrition and undernourishment. If you go and preach morality to a continent like that, then you are the one who is a fool. You are the one who is building castles in the air. You have to feed Africa first. Because you robbed Africa of its minerals. You means who? The former imperial powers. This irony of Africa which we witness today is because of this scourge and menace called as colonialism. So today the whites, they are in no position to preach morality to Africans, because first you have to feed the Africans. When it was time to feed the Africans, you robbed them of their minerals, you robbed them of their food, you robbed them of a chance to have a respectful and an honorable life. It's so funny that the FIFA World Cup is going on right now. And while I was watching the FIFA World Cup, again, this whole thought came to my mind. And again, I was like scrolling to some of the reels. I came across the reels. One of the reels talked about how majority of the one can say European and North American teams, and even South American teams, they have blacks in their lineups, especially the European teams, right? Including France, by the way. You look at Mbappe, you look at Dembele, you look at other players like Yamal. You look at all, these are all colored people, colored gentlemen who have come from Africa, right? What do you understand? That the same person, had that person who was born in Algeria or Morocco or Libya or Congo or Ghana or Ivory Coast, that person would have possibly, not certainly, possibly sunk into depression, or would have possibly been hijacked for some criminal activity by some organized cartel. Or even if that person decided to lead a normal life, that life would have been full of, peppered with a lot of hard work and struggle. But the moment they reach the shores of France and Spain and Italy and Greece, they start expressing their human faculties in more purposeful and meaningful manner. What do you understand? You feed people and you give them a chance at a good life, then they will express themselves in better ways. There is more to the African story and there is more to the FIFA story. Tune into Roundtable IS, our channel on YouTube and our Instagram pages. You will see that I will use FIFA as a prop to talk about a lot of things, including reverse migration, colonialism and reservation, but not today. So here again, you have to understand, in this essay, you have to build a thesis. Use case studies. The case study of a midday meal scheme, the case study of Africa. Now again, the question that the next question is, sir, इतने ideas मेरे पास आएंगे कहाँ से? आएंगे भी, हाँ. सबर और नजर दोनों रखो. नजर रखो राउंड टेबल पे और सबर रखो रोहन डांगे पे. मैं समय से आ भी जाऊंगा और आपको कंटेंट दे भी जाऊंगा. Ideas are cultivated through brainstorming. आज हम कर क्या रहे हैं? This master class is about brainstorming, right? This is not just about, okay, this sounds like a one-way dialogue, but this is more about presenting ideas to you, deconstructing the ideas and getting a crystallized understanding out of those ideas. You spend 2 hours with me, likewise you spend 60 hours with me in the essay program. Imagine the number of ideas which will be shared with you. Your essays will be checked. They will be evaluated, feedback will be given, and a feedback loop will be created so that you write, the next essay that you write is a good essay. And that is how incrementally, step by step, my dear friend, you will build your Rome. Because Rome was not built in a day, it was built brick by brick, inch by inch, my friend. Those inches are being covered here in the class. A lot of ideas are covered in the class. Go through this masterclass once again. I repeat, I reiterate, I emphasize, because when you go again through this masterclass, you will be able to jot down at least 15 to 20 ideas which you can use in some other essays elsewhere. That's it. Don't worry. Pay attention. Okay. So build a thesis, right? The writer must decide what exactly they want the reader to believe by the end of the essay. The central proposition or thesis acts as the intellectual compass that guides every paragraph. Okay. Abhi, again I have given an example. Compare the statement, technology has advantages and disadvantages. With technology expands human capacity but cannot replace human wisdom. The first merely identifies a topic. The second makes a reasoned claim that invites analysis, debate and evidence. Same ही चीज बोली है ना, technology has its own advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons. Second statement says it expands human capacity but cannot replace human wisdom, right? This is your thesis, this is the structure, this is the body of the answer. अब यहाँ पे आपको इसके examples देने पड़ेंगे. When you build a thesis, always remember you have to give examples, use cases, case studies, focus on that. There is no running away from it. Human capacity but cannot replace human wisdom. Yes, this lecture can be also delivered by a AI avatar of Rohan Dange. But will an AI avatar of Rohan Dange be able to build a relationship with students? The AI avatar of Rohan Dange is not the AI avatar of this failure called Rohan Dange. Why am I calling myself a failure? I always tell my students I am a case study of failures. And a case study of failures is the best person to teach. Why? It's because we have failed in all forms possible. So our experience, the body of our experience is much bigger and better than somebody who has cracked the exam in the first attempt or the second attempt. Right? The AI avatar would know the books that I have read or whatever that I have fed into the system. But the AI avatar wouldn't know the actual real challenges that I faced while I was writing the essay. See, one of my students, I'll give you a story of my students. He was ranked 13. Obviously, cannot disclaim the, disclose the name here for obvious reasons. But in one of the mains, you know what happened was he could not clear in the first attempt. In the second attempt, what he did was that apart from all the fine touches and apart from all the, one can say, filling the gaps, apart from doing the needful, what he also did was he went to the market. We were in Karol Bagh in Delhi at that point in time. He went to the market and he got himself a second hand table with a wobbly leg. And I had just started teaching at that point in time. I had asked him, why did you do that? He said that, sir, the center which was allocated to me was a school in my mains, and the tables had wobbly legs over there, and as a result of that, while I was writing feverishly and rigorously, the table was also shaking, and as a result of that, it may have had an impact on my speed. See the commitment of the candidate here. That is the kind of commitment you need. You don't need to just study. This is called as commitment. Devil lies in the detail and excellence also lies in the detail. Look at the detailing here. Anyways, coming back. So since we are on the topic of human wisdom, now this experience, this second-hand experience that I derive from my student, I can share this with my students, right? Do you think a machine will be able to recall something like this? No, a machine will be able to recall my understanding of India's international relations, my understanding of, India's foreign policy, my understanding of geopolitics, data, AI and regulation, my understanding of defense. But a machine will never be able to teach you through wisdom. Wisdom is a purely human pursuit. I'll explain to you. Give me a moment. I will explain to you through a idea called as feminism. Okay. Now this is a story. This is not just a story. This happened with me. About 16, 17 long years ago, my parents were celebrating their silver jubilee anniversary. And what happened was that my father got some gifts for my mother. It was a juicer blender or something, right? A mixer grinder and a juicer blender. My dadi, my grandmother, was alive at that point in time. God bless her soul, wherever she is. She is witnessing this. Now, when the gifts are delivered in the morning, right? Because the shop with which he had placed the orders, they had sent some people to, install. My grandmother says that, look at my son. I have brought up a very forward looking son, a modern and a progressive son, and I'm proud of him. He is somebody who deeply cares about gender parity and the well being of his wife. We were supposed to go for dinner that night, and my mom was in a foul mood through the day. And I asked her, why are you in a foul mood? You've got your gifts also. She said, I'm not really happy for the fact that I don't think your father is a feminist. I think your father is a product of patriarchy, given the fact that he got me a mixer blender or a juicer, which means that I'll always be restricted to the kitchen. If he really cared for me, he could have gotten me an ornament, or he could have taken me out to Kashmir. We could have gone somewhere to celebrate our 25th anniversary. Now today, when you talk about women today, majority of them, if you talk to them, they will tell you that if it's an anniversary, why does the man have to fret about it? It is a collective, or one can say it is a partnership, sir. Therefore, a woman should also be, one can say, contributing equally to the occasion. Why only a man? So there are three women: my grandmother, my mother, and my wife. All of them have a definition of feminism. Whose definition of feminism is correct? Everybody is correct. Why? Because there is something called as time and space. मेरी दादी इन 1930 एंड 1940 उस समय का फेमिनिज्म मतलब, या 1950s का फेमिनिज्म मतलब, मैन contributing positively to a woman's life, but inside the house, right? तब वुमेन को, औरत को मरना नहीं चाहिए और औरत को जलती हुई चिता पे नहीं झोंकना है, इसी को फेमिनिज्म बोलते थे. मतलब किसी को मरते मरते बचा लो, विच इज मोस्ट बेसिक, वाज नोन एज फेमिनिज्म. राजा राम मोहन रॉय, द इंडियन रेनेसा. बट आप 70s 80s और 90s में जाते हो तो women started expressing themselves. It is not just about us surviving. It is also about us going out, expressing ourselves, wearing good clothes, eating good food, and enjoying everything that a man enjoys. And today's feminism in the 21st century is about no distinction between a man and a woman when it comes to expression, when it comes to earnings, when it comes to empowerment. Everything is the same. Man is not the enabler. At times, even a woman can be an enabler. So all three women in different times and space have existed. And as a result of that, their definition of feminism has also evolved over a period of time. Why am I telling you this? I am telling you this for two reasons. First, ideas are not permanent. Ideas evolve. So don't be so rigid. And that should reflect in your essays also. You should not be so rigid in your essays. And at the same time, this experience of mine 16, 17 years ago, do you think my AI avatar would ever be able to use this experience and teach his students? No. My AI avatar would fetch that definition from a portal on the web and give you that definition and talk about summits and talk about books which have been written and talk about the struggle which has peppered human history in the last 200 years with respect to feminism. But we'll never be able to dissect and distill and decode and deconstruct and crystallize the idea as much as I did. And why was I able to do it? Because I had a very human experience on the anniversary of my parents. Can you use these personal incidents here? Yes. So while you are building a thesis, use anecdotal evidence also. What kind of evidence? Anecdotal evidence means evidence from personal experience at the level of society and at the level of individual, both. You can use that anecdotal experience. Okay, so build a thesis. So first identify the question, answer the question, build an argument, and then build a thesis. That is how you build an essay, right? By the way, all these PDFs are available on our website. Please visit our website to download the PDF, right? So yes, your thesis should form an intellectual compass. I talked about the idea of feminism, correct? So an intellectual compass means that your ideas should become crystal clear. When I talk about feminism in my essay, the paper checker knows for a fact that this person is a modern progressive intellectual, or this person is somebody who believes in the ideas of liberty, who believes in the ideas of free will. That is my intellectual compass. In the essay on war, if I focus too much on war, it reflects my intellectual compass. It reflects upon my intellectual compass that I am somebody who gets excited at the prospect of violence and bloodshed. And when I say that diplomacy and peace measures should be given priority and should take precedence over war, it reflects upon my intellectual compass as a person who is pacifist, as a person who is peace loving. So your right ideas and your right thoughts should always reflect in the essay while you are building use cases and while you are explaining it through anecdotal evidence or other such examples. Okay. So that's how, see, I have discussed everything in terms of build the argument. You have to persuade, not display. Persuasion and display are two different things. We have discussed so many concepts today. I have tried to persuade you about ideas. Like how I have been persuading you with the idea of answer writing. Even in the previous masterclass on answer writing, I did the same. And today in the masterclass on essay also, I'm doing the same. That critical thinking and writing go hand in hand. And I'm persuading you by using the examples, by conducting master classes, and also by one can say by telling you or by sharing with you the results of the toppers in the past and how writing has become the benchmark for a good UPSC prep. That is persuasion. Persuasion requires time and effort. In your case, in the essay, it requires words, it requires case studies, it requires examples. And most importantly, when you talk about these examples, always remember facts, quotations, statistics, historical events, philosophical ideas, and contemporary examples acquire value only when they are used to support the central claim. Whenever you give a fact, maybe you quote economic survey, maybe you've quoted union budget or something else, the last line of every paragraph should go back to your central theme. Okay, whatever the paper, whatever the essay statement is. And you know what happens? This also allows you to build linkages between paragraphs. When I'm talking about morals are for those who can feed themselves, in that essay, I talk about midday meal scheme. I talk about how if children are given the, one can say, food security and nutritional support, they can be brought into the fray for education. And therefore, morality can be taught to them in the confines of the classroom in a systematic manner. When I say, and therefore I'm putting food in the belly of people, when I say this, I can also say, additionally speaking, therefore, morals are for those who can feed themselves. And I'll add one more line in the next paragraph. Taking cue from our previous understanding, we can superimpose this idea on African continent as well. So now I have maintained continuity between what? Between midday meal scheme and African continent, right? Then I can go on to add feminist movements also. When I'm talking about African continent, I can say that a war zone area, an area of civil war, is where women and children are hurt the most. And therefore, the idea of feminism also in Africa has been a casualty. Right? And then if you want to add something, you can take the idea of feminism in the next paragraph. Again, Africa, feminism. You have seamlessly moved from one paragraph to another. So if you want to move from one paragraph to another, if you want to connect a link of ideas, make a chain of ideas, then it is important for you to have a philosophical basis. It is important for you to understand the central theme and keep going back to that central theme. Keep persuading the examiner about your central theme, about your thesis. That नहीं sir, E is equal to MC square, इसलिए तो मैं बोल रहा था E is equal to MC square. Correct? So that is persuasion. Persuasion is display of your intellect, and intellect becomes the sword through which you create your benchmarks or through which you pass on your ideas. Okay, so build the argument. Go through this and you will understand what is building the argument. I have, one can say, academically, intellectually speaking, talked about everything. Okay, arranging the argument, that is link of ideas, is already discussed with you. Okay, logic should be the basis of structuring your essay. See, opinion based essays do not work well. Essays where opinions are shunted or opinion gives way to rational and logic, those essays perform better. Okay, so when you talk about logic, I'll give you an example. Today there's a lot of one can say there's a lot of disgruntlement and disenchantment in the society about a lot of public policies, but a lot of one can say majority of the outrage which comes from the side of people or even from the side of the political classes is based on opinion. It is driven by emotion, and emotion will always mask logic, science, rationality, and eventually truth is the casualty. Whatever it may be, you should never defy logic in your essay. You should always use logic in your essay. Now, how to use logic in your essay? Allow me to explain. Use of logic in the structure. When you talk about use of logic in the structure of your essay, let me exemplify. In my classes, I generally ask students, when the lectures on India, Pakistan begin, I ask them, is Kashmir an integral part of India? Now, obviously, it's a very straightforward question with a very straightforward answer. And majority of the students raise their hands that Kashmir, yes sir, Kashmir is an integral part of India. I also believe that Kashmir is an integral part of India. Wholeheartedly, unequivocally, without a doubt. Then I ask the next question. Do you think that India as a nation is a secular nation? Now, the idea or the definition of secularism has come under some shade of doubt or has been criticized by a section of people. Some students raise their hands and some don't. Right? Now, what is secularism? Secularism is the cohabitation of religions together. Okay? If you claim that India is not a secular nation, India is a nation made up of majoritarian religion, जो रिलीजन मेजॉरिटी में है उसी का देश होना चाहिए, अगर आपको ऐसा लगता है तो then your rights over Kashmir are misplaced, because Kashmir is composed of a religious minority, not a religious majority. Correct? Whereas if you claim that Kashmir is an integral part of India, you also have to accept that India is a secular nation. That religion has got nothing to do with nation building in our moral compass or our intellectual compass. आप दोनों क्लेम नहीं कर सकते that Kashmir is a integral part of India and India is not a secular nation, क्योंकि लॉजिक ही फेल हो रहा है यहाँ पे.
ओपिनियन को हटाओ, लॉजिक को फेल मत होने दो। सेक्युलरिज्म की डेफिनेशन ये है दैट ऑल रिलीजन्स कोएग्जिस्ट टुगेदर, सो रिलीजन हैज नो रिलेवेंस और वैल्यू इन टर्म्स ऑफ नेशन बिल्डिंग, एंड कश्मीर देयरफॉर राइटफुली इज एन इंटीग्रल पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया। वहां पे रिलीजन का एंगल ही नहीं आता। और इफ रिलीजन इज अ मेजर आइडेंटिटी मार्कर और अ मेजर वन कैन से नेशन बिल्डर, कंट्रीब्यूटर टू नेशन बिल्डर, अगर ऐसी बात है तो देन योर क्लेम ओवर कश्मीर बिकम्स वीक। तो कम से कम लॉजिकली गलत नहीं जाना है आर्ग्यूमेंट में। समझ में आ रहा है? लॉजिक को कभी भी कोलैप्स होने मत दो अपने ऐसे में। एंड द पेपर चेकर और द एग्जामिनर इज वेरी वेरी केयरफुली रीडिंग योर essay to check any anomalies or to check for any intellectual hypocrisies or intellectual ironies in your essay. So logic cannot fail in your essay. Every paragraph should emerge naturally from the one before it. Natural flow of ideas. Again, you know, it's easier said than done. Let me tell you, and I also accept that to build something like this, to arrange the arguments properly and coherently and present them in a cogent manner, it takes time. Okay, it takes time. 2 से 3 महीना लगेगा. And we are going to conduct essay writing boot camps in the month of August on all the 4 Sundays, wherein for 6 hours in a day you'll be writing essays and getting discussion videos on that on the same day. These are boot camps. जब हम boot camps करेंगे, जब हम ऐसे के कोर्स में when we spend 60 hours or 40 to 60 hours together, after that by the month of September you would be in a good position to write a good essay, and then you will be confident. Once you are confident, then you can focus on other subjects also. Confidence in essay not only manages good marks for you, but also leaves enough intellectual room or academic room to focus on other subjects. नहीं तो वो हमेशा बिल्डअप होते रहता है, यार ऐसे की तो तैयारी नहीं कर रहे, ऐसे की तो तैयारी नहीं कर रहे. राइट नाउ इज द राइट टाइम. इफ यू आर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर 2027, this is the right time to prepare for your essay. Go for it. So again, logic as a structure, I am talking about the same things here. Rather than treating history, politics, economics, ethics, environment, science, and international relations as isolated sections, they should be woven together into a continuous chain of reasoning that steadily advances the thesis. A well-arranged essay is therefore not merely easy to read, it is easy to understand, it is easy to grasp. क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे? We are talking about something called as intersectionality of thought. Okay. प्लीज मेंटेन इंटरसेक्शनैलिटी ऑफ थॉट. ऐसे को सिर्फ और सिर्फ जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल इफ दे आस्क यू एन ऐसे ऑन एक्स्ट्रा वन कैन से deep space explorations, your essay should not be just about deep space. If there's an essay on social media and AI, and by the way UPSC is asking a lot of questions on social media and AI, so those, they should not be restricted to that particular topic. Every other topic, every other subject and its relevance inputs should go into your argument. Okay, I've talked about critical thinking. It is like that only. It is cross sectionality of thought, where you talk about the ethical perspectives, the geopolitical perspectives, the economic, social, psychosocial and the cultural perspectives of a given phenomena. Okay, so this pillar of your essay writing cannot be neglected. Dimensions are ingredients, sequence is the recipe. The same ideas arranged differently can produce either a scattered discussion or a powerful argument. So therefore, remember, a good structure makes complex ideas easy to follow. Okay. Now I know that you have been patient enough since morning. I will conclude my masterclass today, but I can also promise you one thing, that this is not the only masterclass on essay. We are starting our course on essay on 7th, which is the orientation day. Every week you will have 3 lectures, right? And you will have your answer writing boot camps after the series of lectures is over. We have about 25 sessions for you, running into 2.5 to 3 hours, which means that you have almost 50 to 60 hours of live and recorded sessions coming your way, including all the model answers. So my suggestion to you would be to go to our website and to register for the essay course beginning on 7th of July immediately without much of a further ado, and then allow me to take over wherein I can talk about essay writing in greater detail. So the other pillars of the essay writing will be taken in our orientation session on the 7th of July. I hope to see you then. Until the time we meet, take care and have a very good day. Thank you very much.